It's the Premium Pete Show.
Internets, welcome back to another episode of the Premium Pete Show. Sitting here with my longtime friend, return guest, entrepreneur, risk taker, I would say. At one point in time, he never called himself this, but people did. The Podfather. Communist Chris. Who calls you that?
You, I guess.
Internet's Chris Morrow is back in the building. Chris, listen, when we did our episode, The Future of Podcasting before, it was special. People really took a light to it. I still think in this world where people, I don't want to say they act like they know what they're doing, but in this world where everybody's doing a lot more with podcasting,
Right.
People are still unaware. People are still uninformed. People are still trying to figure it out. And the funny thing about it is, you still to this day, and I remember hearing myself say this, everyone's still trying to figure it out.
Right.
We'll start right off the bat. Years ago, last time we did an episode about a year ago, I said to you, what does it take to be on a network? Is it still the same things you think, or it has changed?
From a year ago?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's changed in the sense that I think there's just more opportunities to be on a network now. Because I think there are more networks. I think there are more platforms. I mean, I won't say who, but I was coming out of a meeting with Meta, and someone was talking about a deal from a platform and a network I didn't even know existed. And I think probably like when we spoke a year ago, it felt like the game was maybe on the verge of getting diluted. Like maybe there are too many players, too many people. Those seem like the good old days. A year later, it's even more diluted now. So I think your chances of like getting on a network or your opportunities are probably better than they were a year ago. I think the challenge is going to be figuring out how to like stand out and actually have some staying power now.
I remember you saying that every company soon will have a podcast.
Yeah.
Do you still feel that way? Or do you feel that has happened since the last time we spoke?
I think it's starting to happen. I think those companies should hire loudspeakers to produce it for them too. But I do think that more and more companies are going to look to podcasts as part of their marketing campaigns, their strategies. I mean, it's interesting. It's not really a podcast, but I saw that the Los Angeles Clippers hired this guy Lee Jenkins, who's like a basketball writer, I think for Sports Illustrated. They just hired him to a front office position. And everyone's like, well, why are you hiring a writer? And they're like, well, we would like his storytelling ability. And it's kind of like, well, what? But it's like, I think even all brands now are realizing like they got to control their own narrative. They got to tell their own story. Even an NBA team feels like it has to have somebody in-house to kind of shape how they're seen. So I was like, yeah, I think a podcast is going to be a big part of that.
You mentioned one time that movie writers will be soon hired, and I'm sure they are being right now to write scripts, for podcasts. Do you remember? I think you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening already. I'm personally talking with a lot of documentary filmmakers over the last year because I think a lot of documentary filmmakers are kind of pivoting now and trying to figure out maybe if podcasting isn't like a more lucrative way for them to use their skill sets. Because the skill sets between being a doc filmmaker and doing like a scripted podcast probably aren't that different. I mean, there's part of the story that you tell visually, obviously, when you're doing a documentary film, and you have to figure out a way to get that across in podcasting, and I think people are still trying to figure that out. But the skill set is pretty similar, and like I'm not deep into documentary filmmaking, but it seems like it's kind of a tough way to make a living, right? You make a doc film, even if it's maybe like something like Wild Country like gets on Netflix and they get a big deal for that. But a lot of these guys like make these incredible films and they're out there on the film circuit and maybe it shows in a couple movie theaters around the country. What do you really have? Maybe you take that same story, you make a podcast and you hope that it hits. And if it hits on a level of, a serial or something like that, you're sitting on something bigger than, 90% of the documentary films out there.
We always laugh about this, but the once a week podcast ritual that people, it's changed a little bit. People have done seasons, You know, seasons are a big thing now.
Yeah.
You know, even just, you know, doing a kind of like a docuseries as a podcast has been done. But once a week, and again, I always laugh at this because I don't know where it was started from, but I've been doing podcasts with you and the whole team and everybody once a week for, almost 9 years. Can you see that being more of like every day? You know, I mean, there's some people who do it because I remember you saying one time, like
New York Times has a really
yeah.
good, The Daily.
Yeah.
I don't listen to it, but when I have listened to it, it's always been pretty good. And I think Vox Media is starting a daily podcast. So I think that definitely is going to be a direction a lot of people are moving in. And then also the seasonal thing too. Because I think the thing that a lot of people are realizing is like it's a grind to put out a show week after week, year after year. Like you have to build in some sort of break for yourself.
You know, it's crazy because I think that we speak about companies wanting to do podcasts. And
Yeah.
I like the way you say hire loudspeakers.
Right.
Because, you know, it's funny. A lot of these people are having budgets and thoughts and ideas of creating content, creating storytelling, creating podcasting. You know, it makes so much sense to hire people who, you know, are professionals, who have experience in it. I mean, think about it, right?
Amen.
No, I'm saying like
Right.
it is true. I mean, you know, but it is true. Don't you think that sometimes some people don't get this? You know, like some companies that may not understand this.
Well, you know, I think what happened was, look, the climate that allowed us to just decide one day, like we're starting a podcast network, is what allowed a lot of brands to look at the space too and just say, hey, we can do this ourselves. Because to start a podcast or even a network, you really don't need that much compared to historically. Like, if you wanted to make a film, even 20 years ago, you needed a lot of money.
Sure.
And if you wanted to make a film studio, you really needed a lot of money.
Or a music video.
Whatever. With the technology, this shit has gotten so cheap now. You want a podcast, well, you just need a couple mics and a laptop, really.
True, and I will say true, and then I also feel that some people, you know, the professionalism of people who know what they're doing could help guide people to the promised land.
Look, I mean, you know, like I won't name names again, but like, you know, me and Mena worked on a branded podcast where we were hired because we were the experts and we had the experience. But then everybody else involved in the process was, you know, literally in the room, literally ready. Because it just seems easy, you know. If you wouldn't do that in a film setting, right? You would
Sure.
say, I have no experience in film. But there's something about podcasting that feels so accessible that I think people just naturally assume that they could do it too. And I think now what you're seeing is a lot of people on the brand side stepping back and being like, all right, let's let the people who have the experience cook.
You know, it's funny because the last episode we did, I remember getting so much love socially, and I remember I even got brought down to like a conference in Detroit, and a couple of people mentioned it to me while I was up on the panel. You know, anyone, you're right, let's segue right into it. Anyone could start a podcast.
Sure.
But in this day and age, how do you get recognized? Because they say cream rises to the top, right? But it's not as easy. So what I mean by that is like that's why it to align yourself. Like you think about it, when we were doing it, we just did it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, I mean, you know, you came in and you were able to advise, but you're not. I mean, you know more now than you ever knew. You know, from experience, right?
Yeah, but you know, like some things have remained the same, right? Like my pitch to people always was do a podcast because you really want to do a podcast. It's still the same. You know, like chances are you're not going to make a lot of money off of this. Chances are you're not going to chart on iTunes or whatever other, you know, type of validation you're looking for. You should still probably do a podcast for the same reason you were going to do one 5 years ago. You just got something you really want to talk about. You got a story you really want to tell. And if all those other things come, great. But, you know, I think the idea to like get into it now because you think it's a great look or someone's going to hand you a bag, like I think you're going to be pretty disappointed. There are a lot of podcasts out there right now. A lot. Like we don't even know how many. Maybe 300,000 on iTunes.
That's crazy.
And how do you curate that?
Are you still getting tons of emails with people wanting to come on the network?
Yeah.
Last time we met, I says you had to get somebody to sift through those emails.
It slowed down.
Okay.
I think maybe people are starting to kind of understand that, like, all right, maybe this isn't going to be the kind of quick hit that we were expecting it to be. I mean, I still get them. I still get pitched a lot, and like I think I said last time, like in the back of my mind, I'm always worried, like, did I just potentially pass up on somebody who would have been really great? But the other side of it is like, how do we let's say I said, all right, I'm going to hire somebody to like really go through these and see where the gem is buried in this.
Sure, diamond in the rough.
Right. How do you listen to 300 podcasts?
Smoke some weed.
Somebody could, not me, but yeah.
I will say this though. When you really think about the landscape of podcasting, and I remember you telling me this, and it really stuck out. And the crazy thing is one thing I really admire about you is that you're not a person that likes to boast or this, but a lot of people have been inspired by your moves and your smarts and your talent. I remember you telling me before that if you could do it all over again, that you would have took more risks.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Tell the internet about that.
Well, I mean, I think when we started Loudspeakers, we were, I hedged my bets a lot. I kind of focused on the stuff that was right in front of us and that felt doable or reachable instead of taking a gigantic leap of faith. I didn't mortgage my house. I didn't go around asking, people for money or trying to, like, I worked my ass off. I put in the hours, but I didn't take those sort of steps. And I do sometimes wonder, like, if I had just gone all the way. I mean, the other thing you got to remember is when I started Loudspeakers, I had a whole other career that was going on as a writer. Yeah. That's still going on. So
wait, hold on. Just for the people who listen at home, Chris Morrow, besides many other things, besides being a co-founder of Loudspeakers Network, veteran radio guy, producer, author. So now we just got to drop some of the books. You've done books for Russell Simmons,
Charlemagne.
You did both his books, right?
Both of Charlemagne's books with him. Rev Run. I did a book with him and his wife. I did a book with Rev Run and Tyrese. I did a book for LeBron James' high school coach, Joyce.
Yes.
And Ivanka Trump is the other.
Yeah, we went over that fucking story about that.
We talked about her, right?
So back to what you're saying. You're saying you
So I was doing all that. Like I wasn't. I think sometimes people take risks because they're risk takers, which I'm not by nature. Or like they're forced into the situation. But I was doing fine, like I didn't feel like I had to go to that level because I already had a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, if I look back on it from 2020, hindsight, my message to the people is like, if you got an idea you really feel good about and you think, there was never a question in my mind that like we could build a podcasting, hip hop podcasting network. Like I was always very confident that Loudspeakers would become a thing. Sure. Like I could see the vision very clearly. And I remember the night, because I did an interview the other day and a woman was asking me, do you remember the moment that Loudspeakers started? And I said, yeah, I remember it very clearly. We were at Ben Amin's house, right? And it was a meeting, the Combat Jack show had called a meeting because there was some, people are upset about something. We went to Ben's house. There was like nowhere to sit. There was just like a bunch of office chairs in, his bedroom. And, everyone was like rolling blunts and just kind of like bitching about whatever was happening with the Combat Jack show. And I remember saying like, you guys can have, do whatever the fuck you want with the show. I'm trying to make a network. I'm not trying to make just one show. Like I want to make a network with this. And I was like, oh, okay. So, I mean, I remember, and I knew it, like, even when I said it, I was like, it's going to happen, because I could see it so clearly. So, to get back to it, my message to people is like, fuck it. If you see something that clearly, and you feel that, mortgage your house. Go all in, I mean, I'm kind of underselling myself. I went pretty far in.
Yeah,
I pushed a lot of chips to the table, but I could have pushed a couple more. Put all your chips in.
You know, the reason, go all in.
Go all in. Fuck it.
The reason why I say that for is because even like there's some people, and you've publicly admitted that you wish you would have signed. Like Desus and Miro.
Yeah.
But you also explained that you never not thought that they were talented. You explained that maybe you didn't have the good enough of money.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, the reason I say I could have gone more in and tried to raise money or mortgage my house or whatever is, yes, there were moments where, like we talked to Desus and Miro very early. We talked to Budden, like we always had those conversations with those people. Nori. I just didn't have the bag that they wanted at that time. Maybe if I had mortgaged some stuff, I could have come up with that. And then, those are obviously all big shows, big talents,
Is there anybody else who got away that you wish you would have
say
signed?
those are the
three biggest?
Three, yeah. I mean, and look, who knows? Just because I talked to somebody doesn't mean that they were going to sign anyway. I mean, you could ask all three of them. They might have a completely different...
They're like, he didn't come with the motherfucking check?
Right, and even if I had come with the check, you don't know. Maybe they wouldn't have. Maybe they all individually would have said, we want to be on our... we don't want to be in somebody else's house.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. But, we certainly talked with them and, had what I thought were, like, pretty real conversations.
Speaking about somebody like Joe Budden, you look at what they... Which, to be honest with you, a couple of things. One is they remind me of the beginning, before we had guests on, the Barbershop Combat Jack Show days. Yeah. They definitely remind me of that. The crazy thing is, I like how long that I remember everyone, saying that, why don't these guys have ads? Like, I remember hearing that around all over. And it's funny because I feel like they either they knew what they were doing or didn't know what they were doing. It didn't matter because their time came.
Right.
And I feel like they made the most of it. Now, you dealt with Spotify. You dealt with... Is that surprise you to see an exclusive Spotify deal like that?
No, it doesn't surprise me. It concerns me a little bit.
Why?
Because I think you're going to see more of it, and I think it's going to be good in some regards. I mean, I think it's going to be good for me as someone who's running a podcast network. I think it's going to be good for a lot of the top shows because I think there's going to be people gravitating to those platforms. I think it's going to suck a little bit of the soul out of the industry, but it was kind of inevitable anyway. And I think that's one of the things I've kind of been thinking about a lot lately is when you're at the ground floor of something, and we were at the, we're at the ground floor of this. Like, I think we can say that without, and still be humble about it. Like, we were really there at that moment, and you dream of it. I always use like the town analogy. You're in the town with just like a couple of dirt roads and people setting up tents, but you guys are all working to turn it into this great city, and you dream of when there's going to be high rises and mansions and all that sort of shit. But when you actually start to get there, you realize that stuff comes at a price, right? And we're going to start to see the cost that comes with this, right? We've kind of, as an industry, as a space, been able to kind of do what we want, say what we want, kind of just
work with who we want.
The Wild West a little bit. And look, I think the deal, like Budden's deal, is great. I mean, I think it's great for them. I think it's great for the space. Like the phrase is, I think the rising tide lifts all boats. I think everybody benefits from it. Like, I like to see them getting billboards the same way I like to see the Re getting billboards and subway advertisements. I think it's just good for the space. But at a certain point, like, part of me does wonder, like, how corporate are we going to get? What's going to be the other side of that? What's that going to look like? Because I'm a little romantic. Like, I like, when we were just coming in and bullshitting and making shit up on Combat Jack Show, and like, that had a great energy, right?
Sure.
We all wanted money.
Sure.
The money's coming now, but is that energy still there?
It's funny, too, because when I look back to the beginning Combat Jack Show days, I say sometimes the people who, push through certain doors are not the ones that always make the biggest money.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like a podcast could come now that could gain some ground and make money quicker than say it took us to make money. I remember 4 years, 3-4 years it took us. I was telling, I talk about it all the time. There's times where I remember coming into the city, not much money left in my bank account, just because I wanted to be there. I knew it was something special.
You always have those memories, Pete.
Yeah.
But, it's like Jazz Fly says, like, she always says this to me. It kind of scares me when she says it. But she's like, you don't want to be the first one over the top.
Yeah.
She's like, the first one over the top's the one who gets shot.
Yeah.
You want to be the second or the third one over the top. She's like, you're kind of been the first one over the top a lot. And I was like, God damn it, you're right. But what are you going to do?
It makes sense. It's like you even think about like what it takes to run a network or what it takes to keep something afloat. It's funny because I remember, I don't remember, maybe it was a couple of months ago. You were in the loudspeaker studio.
Yeah.
Vacuuming.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I said, hey, listen, make sure make sure that vacuum is going. And we laughed and we thought about it because here's the thing. We live in a day and age where people will probably say like, yo, I would love to be Chris Morrow. Or they see a picture of you, say you take a picture on vacation and like, I want to be like that.
Right.
Because I'm able to go on vacation or I'm able to do this. Not knowing that here you are vacuuming and sweeping up fucking chips in a fucking studio.
We're going to find out who left those.
Who left those? I'll be honest with you, it had to be maybe Schultz.
Everyone, all signs are pointing to Flagrant 2.
Yeah,
but,
Schultz and Akash.
Right.
That fuck Akash. Wait till I see Akash. Call me regular premium.
Right.
But anyway,
you got to vacuum the floor,
bro.
You got to fucking sweep up, man.
Before you even get into this,
yeah,
you guys taught me a lot on the Combat Jack show from beginning days. And you know what you taught me? I was on mic and I was getting guest drinks.
Yeah.
Like to see you do that didn't surprise me because I was like that's what it takes to make it. But not everybody understands that.
You can't have any ego, man.
Yeah.
I mean, you can. I don't. One of the you get older and you start to kind of like begin to understand who you are and what your strengths are. I'm a worker. I don't know if I'm that creative or that, but I gotta work. Like if I'm not working, I get uncomfortable. And I got it from my father. My father's the same way. Like he has to be working. Like it's not about the money. He just needs to be doing something productive, or else he's like the joke in our family is even when he watches the NBA, like we're both NBA fans. He can't sit down when he watches an NBA game. He stands up the entire time.
Sure.
Because it's just like you're wasting time. If you're sitting down, you're admitting that you're not working.
Sure.
If you're standing up, there's still a chance you might be doing something.
Unless I'm driving, I can't sit down and be on the phone. Really? I have to make circles. Like I circle around the room. I circle around my house. Like whenever I talk on the phone, I circle. Sometimes
I'll even walk outside of my building.
Yeah.
But there is something like I kind of realized that about myself, which is like I gotta work. Like I'm not. I run my own shit. I could spend half the day just kind of fucking around if I wanted to, but I gotta put the work in. So like, yeah, if you have a podcast and you're trying to make it pop, you're gonna get the guest a glass of water.
Sure.
If you come in the studio and you see some shit on the floor, you're gonna clean it up. You're going, like, I don't think there's ever, I don't think you ever reach any sort of level where it's like you can then put it on cruise control. Mm. And like we talked about like some of the books I've written. Like all those books I wrote for the most part were success books. Mm. These people sharing their
journey,
their secret to success.
Okay, yeah.
But a lot of the time, like what I took from it wasn't in the book. Like what I took from it was watching. Because I get to trail these people, I get to spend time with them, live with them, even. So I'm really watching them, and like you take Russell, like obviously, what happened with him is unfortunate to say the least, and like I don't want to like big him up in that regard, but at the same time I learned a lot from the guy.
What would you say you learned from him?
Well, I learned a lot from him. Even if he didn't always practice what he preached, I thought he preached pretty good stuff, for starters. And then he was a guy, like, you can say, okay, you're the Podfather. Like, that guy had reached, he invented an industry, right? And if there was something that guy needed from somebody or needed for a deal or something, like, he had zero ego. He would beg, he would cajole, he'd threaten, like... And, I think people think you reach a certain stage and it's just like, well, now I'm Russell Simmons and I'm not going to ask this person who isn't Russell Simmons, to help me with this or for assistance with that or to sweat them. Why would I sweat? This guy didn't give a fuck, man. Like, if there was something that he needed that he was working on, like, he would just be on it. And it was always interesting because I would see people who hadn't achieved the level of success that he had kind of at a certain point start adopting this attitude. Like, I can't do that. I can't ask him for that, or I can't tell him I need his help for that, or I can't ask her to make that call for me. Like, that's beneath me. But I'm like, these guys who are really doing it, like, they don't stop. Like, I haven't worked with Puffy the same way, but I got to imagine it's the same way.
Sure.
Like, if he wants something, you think he's not going to make a call because he's Puffy? No, like, they're kind of like, they just have to keep moving and doing stuff. So I always kind of made a note of that. Like, you don't reach a certain point in your career or your life or whatever, and then you don't have to get your elbows dirty anymore. You don't have to get in the weeds and fight. No, like, if you want to stay relevant and keep moving, you got to keep doing that sort of stuff.
I agree. You said before we were speaking about companies and having podcasts. Do you still believe advertisers look down on podcasting? I don't want to say, you know what, let me fix that. I don't want to say look down, but you know how, like, in radio, they would think, like I was telling you, like, some companies feel like, well, we advertise on radio. What's the difference of podcasting? I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there were advertisers that weren't really paying attention to podcasting, and now they're creating budgets for it.
I don't think anybody's looking down on podcasting. I think what the question is, how do we make sense of these metrics? I think that's the question that they're trying to figure out internally. I think they'd love to invest in podcasting. I think they're going to continue to invest in podcasting. I mean, you got to look from a brand. If you're a marketer or somebody at a brand, like, your goal is always like, what's that next big marketplace out there,
Sure.
Right? Like, how do I expand to a larger audience? How do I get this product in front of more eyes or ears or whatever the case may be? So if you're like one of these people in a traditional media company, the most obvious place you're going to look to right now is podcasting. Sure. In 2018. Of course you're going to look at podcasting. You want to spend money. The problem is there's a system that's been set up that you spend your money through that system, and the system now has to figure out how to plug podcasting into it. But the money's going to get bigger for sure.
Do you feel that only big shows can deliver for advertisers? Do you feel there are shows that, because I remember, like, we spoke about this a bunch of times, but you felt like, even for someone to look at you had to have what, like you said, like 25,000 downloads. Now you're saying maybe 50. Then you're saying maybe more.
But the flip side, yeah, I would say those are like good starting points, unless you have an audience that's specific that matches with a product that's trying to reach that specific audience.
Sure.
So, you might have a show that does 12,000 listens a week, which on the face of it might not seem to be that big an audience, but you talk about parenting issues and you've done surveys that show, 80% of your audience is new mothers with children under the age of, and there's some fucking, I don't know. Similac or a detergent company that gets grass stains out of kids' pants, whatever the case may be. And they're like, bang, that's exactly
what we're looking for.
Who we're looking to touch. Yeah, then they will probably take a shot at you. And if they take a shot at you and they see results, they might keep coming back and back.
We speak about results. When you speak about advertisers, a lot of them try two different ways. One is the direct, like a promo code, right, and the other one is just advertising. Do you feel one shows more value than the other?
value.
Right, meaning to the advertiser, because it's like, one is, I guess, people are buying. What is that called? Direct response, and then there's
direct response. The value in that to the advertiser is they immediately see what sort of, in the industry term is ROI, return on investment, that they're getting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Casper Mattress is advertising on the Premium Pete Show. Go to Casper.com, put in offer code Premium Pete, get 30% off your next mattress. They're going to see exactly how many mattresses they sold versus the amount they spent for the advertisement. And then they'll do whatever sort of internal calculation they'll do, and they'll say this is a good investment and we'll keep doing it, or we didn't sell enough mattresses, it's not worth it. On to the next podcast. Versus, the analogy I use a lot is Heineken, let's say. Hey, this is Premium Pete, make sure you drink Heineken. I like Heineken. They're not offering you're not going to Heineken.com and getting
a 6-pack,
getting 30% off your next 6-pack, offer code Premium Pete. They just want to be part of your movement, and they just want to, reach your listeners off of the strength of your personality. That's harder for them to track. They don't know how many.
Sure, but it's still valuable.
It's got a ton of value. It's just they're used to doing it on a much bigger stage, right?
Sure.
They're used to, Pepsi's used to
Super Bowl.
The Super Bowl. They're not used to doing a podcast that only reaches let's say 100,000 people.
Sure.
So I think what's happening now is, and you got to understand, I don't think a lot of people always realize this, it's never as simple as Casper or Pepsi or Heineken reaches out to Premium Pete and says, we want to advertise on your podcast. There are all sorts of middlemen involved, whether it's a podcasting network, whether it's a marketing agent, and they have all sorts of systems in place on how A, you spend the money for the company, and then B, how you figure out that ROI. So I think what's happening now is there's a lot of reconfiguration going on where the marketing companies who handle the bigger accounts are conceding that, yes, there is value in podcasting. We just don't know how to show it, right? But then again, to me, how did you show how many people bought Pepsi, when Michael Jackson came down the, moonwalking down the shit with his hair caught on fire? Like, it's always been that question. It's just you're spreading such a wider net when you're advertising on NBC during halftime of the Super Bowl versus the Premium Pete Show. So I think they just have to kind of figure it out.
I always use the analogy to this. I remember somebody saying a Super Bowl commercial is $3 million. Just say for
argument's sake, yeah.
Okay, for what, 15 seconds?
Right.
And then I remember them saying, and they use Kim Kardashian, for example, right? They say she has 100 million followers on Twitter. This is a while ago. I remember hearing this. She tweets out something. It goes directly to everybody's phone because everyone's looking at it.
Right.
And that is better advertisement for them, and it costs them less money than, say, a Super Bowl ad. Except, go ahead.
Too many celebs started doing that, and now people are smart. You can instinctively know when you look at a tweet whether this is just somebody got paid to do it or it's real. And I think that's a good example because the argument in favor of the value of podcasts are when someone really fucks with the product and really gives it a great read, it stays with the consumer longer. It has more impact rather than, Kim Kardashian's going to reach X amount of million people, but when she just writes, oh my God, I love Pepsi, what does that really...
Sure.
Versus, let's say you're only going to reach a handful of those people, but if you gave a really funny, impassioned, organic, Grillo's Pickles, let's say they advertise on here,
sure.
And, we started talking about Grillo's Pickles, and then you started talking about the time your guy sent my daughter the pickles because she's a pickle fan, and she went
crazy.
She opened it up and she dressed up in all the Grillo Pickles gear, and she made a little video of herself screaming, "Oh my God, pickles!" And she put, and we started talking about that. That might actually move somebody to try
it out.
Versus a celebrity being like, I love pickles.
Sure. I guess the reason why I say that is because that delivery has transformed into podcasting, where people can now deliver advertisement into audio. where it's like people are listening. And that essentially, I feel like it's almost more important than, say, commercials on TV,
It can be. I mean, I think it all comes back to storytelling. Like, can you figure out a way to tell the story of this brand or this product? If there is, sometimes, a bag of chips is just a bag of chips, right? Like, there's not really a story behind it. But if you can find a way to humanize the experience and that goes a long way, right?
Yeah.
Like I always felt one of the most impactful, and it was totally kind of unorganized and unstructured, but, campaigns, influencer campaigns was like Tax with Doucet,
Yeah.
Like people drank Doucet because it felt so organic, and he never out and out said like, it was just Doucet was part of his show.
Sure. I mean, he got that. I remember, like, he was pushing it so hard that Memphis and all of them had to, get it. Like, we can get you involved for sure. That's something I think that a brand really likes. I think a lot of people, look, everybody wants money.
Right.
But I do believe Tax was probably, I'm not, this is not accurate, but I feel like I'm very, true with this. I feel like he was repping before they even gave him money.
But those make the best campaigns, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Right. Something that I actually really fuck with. Something that's part of my experience, my lifestyle. I'm already doing it. And now, now it's recognized and kind of made official.
Before we go to break, what are you listening to these days? What podcasts are you listening to?
Let me open up my phone.
There we go. Open up that podcast app.
I just finished the RFK tapes.
Okay, nice.
Which I enjoyed a lot. I recommend that. I have been listening to The Daily Show.
Okay.
I always listen to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, which I'm a fan of. I just listened to an 8-hour episode about the rise of the Japanese military industry prior to World War II. So you guys are all going to want to check that out. And people ask me a lot what I'm listening to. I've kind of checked out of the whole political discussion because it depresses me and I don't feel like I can do anything about it. So what I find a lot of kind of like, I don't know if the word is comfort, but I listen to a lot of NBA podcasts.
Really?
Yeah, and I just, that really like mellows me out.
So you like sports podcasts?
No, just NBA.
Okay.
Just I don't care about football, baseball, anything else.
What do you think about fantasy podcasts? Do you think that can make sense?
What do you mean?
Like fantasy football podcasts,
Yeah, if I was into fantasy sports, I don't play fantasy sports anymore. I would totally listen to like a 3-hour NBA fantasy podcast. If that's
or even shorter to prepare for your week. Think
Yeah.
about that. I never thought about that. A fantasy football.
I'm sure there's got to be.
Yeah, they're short.
I mean, it's not my thing, but I got to believe that just ESPN alone probably has like.
I'm sure.
Not just one fantasy sport podcast, but probably like a separate channel of them or some shit like that.
I'm sure. Internets, listen, we're going over the state of podcasting. Before we called it the future of podcasting. This time we're going to call it the state of podcasting with the one and only Chris Morrow, okay? You call him the Podfather. He doesn't call himself that. But at the same time, Chris, you don't call yourself an OG. Internets, you're not supposed to call yourself an OG. Let somebody else call you that, right? I always say this.
Yeah, I would have called myself the Podfather because it's a good name, but my reasoning was I heard that I wasn't the first.
Okay.
That Jalen Rose started calling Bill Simmons that.
Really?
Yeah, so.
All right, well.
It's unfortunate because I like it.
God bless him.
Yep.
Internets, we'll be right back. Don't go nowhere. Cheer.
Hey, yo, check this out, man. I don't do a lot of fucking podcasts, but I'm going to do premium. What's his name? Yo, it's Premium Pete. All right, Premium Pete, the Premium Pete Show, Coney Island, New York, Brooklyn, Italian, some dude. I'm going to do a show, but is there a check involved? There's no check, nigga. There's no check. Just do it. All right, I got it. Premium Pete. We out.
Internets, and we're back. Sitting here with my guy, Chris Morrow, the Podfather.
Cheer.
Listen, man, I mean, we're just really going over the landscape, man. You know, the landscape of loudspeakers, the landscape of yourself, really, what it's going to be. Before we went to break, we talk about what you're listening to.
Yeah.
You know. Now let's talk about what are people listening to. Like before me and you speak about how crime is humongous. Is crime still the biggest podcasting listen?
Yeah, I think it's still going to be the biggest genre. And I haven't listened to it yet. They released a trailer, but Serial's coming back for a new season.
Really?
I think they're doing an investigation into, I'm talking off the top of my head, I might have this wrong, the Cleveland court system, I think it is. Or the judicial system in Cleveland. So I think that's going to be a different take on the true crime thing instead of investigating, instead of a whodunit, really getting into the weeds of the court system in an American city. But I think that's going to I generally find everything they do is great. So I got to imagine that's going to be pretty incredible. Mm-hmm.
If crime is one of the biggest, what do you think is the next biggest?
I think wellness. And I'm trying to figure out how to make that work myself. But, I think that the American healthcare system is completely broken and fractured and not working. And I think one of the positive aspects of the internet is that there's a lot of information out there that used to just be for doctors. And people, it's also a black hole. Everyone makes a joke about never Google what what you think you have, because you'll diagnose yourself with cancer within 20 minutes. But once you get past that, there's a lot of information out there, and there are a lot of people who are now kind of taking their situations into their own hands, whether it's dealing with stuff that they have or just kind of how to live a healthy lifestyle. And I do think that's going to be the next big wave. The question is always, to me, as someone who's been trying to figure it out, is do you make programming that's based around specific conditions, right? Or specific situations, or how do you make it feel accessible to people, right? Because I think I've talked about it before in the show. I got Lyme's disease. And so I'll find these podcasts and I'll only listen to the episodes that are specifically about Lyme's, but I don't care about somebody who has MS, let's say, or whatever the case, because so I think it's figuring out how to make programming that, because look, at the end of the day, the human body is the human body, and 90% of this stuff is all connected one way or the other. So it's how do you make programming that kind of feels accessible? Doesn't matter if you have a condition, no condition, specific condition. This is just a wave that I kind of want to be part of. And I think people are going to figure it out eventually. And I think that's really going to be the next big thing. People are going to have to get there on their own, though. As much as we don't like to talk about it, we all love, what do they say about TV? It used to be, if it bleeds, it leads, right? People like crime. They like hearing about fucked up situations. They like thinking that they're a detective. That really doesn't do a whole lot for you in your life, though, because we're not detectives, right? But wellness, that's something that actually really does impact all of us. I also think that there's going to be a very big pushback against social media and phones in particular. And I think people are going to really begin to realize that it's making people sick and unhappy. And I think once people start to really accept that, that's also going to make this whole wellness kind of world that much more appealing to people. It's kind of still always been on the fringes still, people with crystals or, whatever the stereotypes are about the wellness scene, but I think it's going to become much more mainstream. Not just in podcasting, but across the board.
The Loudspeakers Network houses some of the, top and greatest podcasts. It's funny because I've seen so many of them just grow from the beginning. I always speak about the Read and what Kid Fury and Crissle have done is amazing, because I think about us being the Combat Jack show, considering that we were the flagship show, we felt.
Sure.
And I remember the Reed coming in and they started taking over our studio time and stuff like that. And
still bitter about that.
No, I'm just saying. I remember me and Combat. Well, Combat he saw it, but I remember us saying to Dallas and bro, what the fuck are these people doing? They're coming here, and look what they became, pure rock stars.
Yeah.
It is amazing to see how much they develop. I mean, for what are they, 5 years?
Yeah, I think they had their 5th anniversary show last year.
Yeah. I know obviously you saw that happening,
Yeah.
Do they still amaze you?
Yeah, I think it's great. And I think what's great about it is that, A, that it happened, and B, that it happened on their own terms. And I think that's what's special about it is a lot of people have to make sacrifices or, do things they're not comfortable with or kind of go against their instincts or their beliefs in order to, or at least even if they don't have to, they feel they might have to. And, I don't know everything that happens in their lives, but I think I have a pretty good view into how they've moved and how they've operated. They haven't made a single compromise. Like they haven't, and there've been opportunities for them to I'm sure people have heard it, but if there's new listeners, tell the people about the bear story. Was that Miller? Yeah, man, I just told this story like an hour ago. And I told them, the person I was talking to, I was like, this is my go-to story, but it's a good one because it illustrates the point. And I'll tell it again. When the show was first starting to like really bubble and, maybe we're getting an ad here and there, but there was no real money that we knew of in the space. We got an opportunity for, I think it was Miller Genuine Draft. They wanted to spend $60,000 to advertise on the read, which was like an unheard of sum. $60,000 to advertise on a podcast. Holy shit. But when we had started, the one thing I'd said to them was I was like, I'm going to bring you opportunities. Never take them if you don't feel comfortable with it. Like, I'm never going to say, hey, come on, we need to do,
Sure.
This is only going to work if the brands you endorse are really brands that you fuck with and feel comfortable with. And I said, okay. But, that's talked until there's actual money on the table. So now we got $60,000 or whatever the number was on the table. And I said, okay, well, we don't drink beer and our audience knows we only drink brown liquor. So how are we going to get on this show and talk about you should go out and buy a Miller Genuine Draft? We're not doing it. And I said, okay, fair enough. That was the deal we made. And, I had to go back to the salesperson and say, they're going to pass. I was kind of like, what do you mean they're going to pass? They're going to pass on this? Are you sure? And I was like, yeah, they're going to pass. And, what I told them when they passed is like, don't worry about it. We're going to get more. There's going to be plenty like this out there. Don't even sweat. And they weren't sweating it. I don't even want to paint it like they were second guessing themselves. They didn't. I was probably just saying that for myself more. But sure enough, that's just like not even in the rearview mirror anymore. And I think one of the reasons they've been so successful with the advertisers that they have on the show is their audience knows that. Their audience knows.
They stay true to themselves.
They're not. I mean, every week I come to them with stuff, and I'm like, I don't even want to. Like tonight, there was a brand that wanted to advertise on the show, and I said to them, I don't know why I'm even letting this come out of my mouth because I know what the answer is, but duty requires that I say, these people would like, Fury said something funny, and like everybody laughed, and it was, basically like fuck no, and I'll go back and I'll tell them tomorrow, sorry. But like that's every week, and like they just won't ever endorse something that they don't feel good about.
I'll tell you one thing. I give them a lot of credit because I remember I told this story. I think you told a story at the live show. And I remember I told you, look, for $60,000, I would have took a fucking bath in that beer.
Right. You would have done a keg stand.
Yeah, I would have done I would have fucking, you know what I mean? I've been swimming in that motherfucker.
Hey, and I couldn't have blamed you. Like, and I wouldn't have blamed them if, like...
I would have told internets, listen, I love you, and I give you all this content every week. Let me fucking backstroke in this Miller Genuine Light,
Well, but that's one of the things, right? Where it's like, I was using the town analogy earlier. Like you start with this little settlement, you really want to become a town, but then you don't realize the things that comes with it. It's the same within advertising. Like I'm, I don't drink soda. I don't recommend people drink soda.
Sure.
Fact is, like there've been a lot of soda. I don't eat fast food. There've been a lot of those opportunities that have come across the table, and I haven't shut them down. Now I always leave it up to the individual hosts. Right? I don't have my own show, so it's not like me personally endorsing it. I don't know, man. If someone offered me $60,000 to McDonald's, I don't know what I would do.
I don't know. Maybe maybe you would eat a Big Mac. But let me ask you. With something like obviously the network has The Read, Brilliant Idiots, Friend Zone, Fan Bros, which is now called For All Nerds.
Yeah.
What else? No Jumper, right? You still have Angela Rye is on there?
Angela Rye's, I'll have an announcement about her shortly. Lip Service. Casey Crew. Mogul.
Who else?
No, you put me on the spot.
I know, right now. Listen, there's
we got a lot of shows.
There's tons of shows on the network. Did you ever feel like, because some of them you're very involved in, you ever feel like you're like the uncle or big brother to a lot of these people, like, or cousin, or just like, you know what I mean? Because it's like you're there for everything, like, especially with Brilliant Idiots. You're like an extension of that show. You know how Wax became such a star?
Yeah.
Like, even you, like, people love when you're on there,
Yeah. I mean, I think that and Combat Jack are the only shows that I've actually, like...
talked on? Oh, you never talked on The Read?
No, I've never been on The Read. I've never been on Friend Zone. It's kind of like the Puffy story, right? Like, you don't want...
all up in the videos.
You don't really want me up. And, I didn't talk on Brilliant Idiots for a long time. And the first couple times I did talk, I think Charlemagne's line was like, I prefer my Jews in the background,
Really?
Like, yeah, it said something like that.
Man, kid, that was what I used to hit you with the burr. Now he hits you with like my Jews in the background.
He's like, we want like a Leor Cohen sort of situation here. But then it kind of became all right. But, it's always been like, you talk about like, oh, is it too late to get into podcasts? I mean, like, that's something I think about me as a person, because, I remember I didn't come to this as an entrepreneur. I came to this as a writer. I've always wanted to do my own podcast.
Sure.
I feel like it's too late now.
Sure.
What
would you want to do it about?
I've had like a million ideas. I've just never pulled the trigger on it.
You ever had like Apple reach out to you? Reason why I asked that for is like where it surprised you, where you guys... I know there's many moments where you're like, all right, we're really doing this. But you ever have Apple reach out to you about something like you guys like and tell you like, hey, you're on the radar of what what we're doing here?
Oh yeah. We had that convo years ago with them. They've been very supportive of us for sure. And it's become harder because they have so many more people.
Sure, that are doing it as well.
Asking that, it used to be it was a small little community. It felt like there were 20 people. Now it's thousands, and I think the challenge for them is like, how do they maintain all those relationships?
What's the wildest podcast idea you ever heard that somebody wanted to do?
The wildest? Wax has been pitching me on some stuff that's pretty wild. I don't want to share it, but it involves lie detector tests. I can tell you that much.
How much does it cost to get a lie detector test?
I've spent a lot of research on that, actually. It costs a lot, and I bought Wax a lie detector test recently, which I think is like a Cracker Jack one, but he's convinced that it's 100% effective and like walks around with it at all times now and actually like keeps it on him and is like trying to get... So there's obviously something there. But I also found one that's like some Israeli company makes it. It's $1,500 and they swear it's...
But who's going to run it? Anybody can run it?
That's what I said to Wax. I was like, he's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I put it on and I ask myself what my birth date is, and then I give like 5 different answers, and it always can tell which the wrong one is.
The fuck out of here.
And I was like, yeah, but it's you. You can't apply a lie detector test to yourself. So I don't want to ruin it for him.
I'll tell you one thing. He is a fucking star, though.
Wax is a star, and we just got to figure out the right... A lot of his ideas so far would be incredible TV shows, and what I'm trying to explain to him is like, we got to make a podcast first. Like lie detector tests. Though Stern would do that.
Yeah, sure.
I remember, I used to listen to Stern, and he would but he had like an actual guy that was his job. He was trained. I was like, Wax, we're not gonna. And then Wax was like, no, we're gonna drive around the city, and we're gonna go to different people's apartments and find out who's cheating on their girlfriends. And I was like, this is like, can we just do a podcast? And then
You know what would have been amazing? The Wax and Tax podcast.
well, that was
I'm glad that he was able to be a guest on the show a couple of times,
they had their own little thing on Charlemagne's MTV2 show. They actually had them sitting in a little booth.
It's crazy because you think about
They
all
didn't know
that
how to
talent.
use them.
No.
But think about it. We said that we were talking on the phone the other
That's
day.
right, yeah. Think about how much talent. Let's go.
Let's think about this. On that show.
MTV2 you're talking about.
Right.
Okay.
Charlemagne, Desus and Mero, Wax,
Crissles.
Tax, Crissle, Schultz. I think Fury was on it a couple. Like, that's a fucking killer lineup, man. They should have just let those guys all go crazy and not try to like. But what are you going to do? Easy for me to say, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of talent.
Yeah.
That's a lot of funny right there.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's amazing that, sometimes I don't think people, get a chance to see what they have in front of them sometimes, or know how to use that talent.
It's tough. But we were talking on the phone. What's the iconic moment from that show? They didn't know how to use Tax and Wax, but what's the iconic moment?
Tax telling
Ja
Ja Rule
saying whatever.
And not really. Yeah.
Right? Like, it was 2 seconds, but that was the moment.
When you think about the podcasting,
Yeah.
do you ever think years to come? You ever think like where it will be in 5 years? Do you think like that?
Yeah, sure.
And
I think it's going to be very corporate.
Okay.
I hope I'm part of it. I think it's going to be very corporate. I think the challenge is going to be, and this is something that I got to figure out, is how do you keep some of the soul in it? And I said that earlier, but I think it's true. Like, how do we, we had a moment with the Combat Jack show, right? That was a real moment.
Sure. Very big moment.
Budden's having a moment.
Sure.
Nori
had a moment. Yeah.
Nori, like, how do you keep that energy as it gets more and
Rap
more?
Radar even had a moment.
Yeah, I'll give him that. I'm not talking necessarily
I know what you mean.
numbers.
Overall, yeah.
I'm talking about when you're in the pocket.
Sure.
You see this in music, like there are musicians or rappers, like when you look back at your career, you can say like that was the stretch where just like they were connected, everything was flowing correctly, they were in the pocket. And I think the question is going to be like, how do you keep those moments sustained? Because a lot of it in podcasting was driven by there were no rules, right? We're going to do this our way. Combat Jack Show, we're doing this our way. Buttons, we're doing this our way. No one's telling us what to do. No one's coming in and saying, could you not make so much fun about blah, blah, blah. We need them to be at the awards ceremony. Or can you not say that about that brand that we got a big deal on the table, right? We were never worried about that shit. Say whatever you want to say. And with the money, it's going to be harder and harder.
Sure, it changes things.
It's going to change. So, I think what everyone's got to worry about is, not worry about, but for me at least, I'm worried that I want to preserve a little bit of that energy.
I like that.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example.
Okay.
When I say how do you build a podcast from the ground up, right?
Yeah.
So people listening, for example, you have two interesting people, right?
Sure.
That don't have huge social media followings, right? How would they build up?
Well, the first thing I would say is you're probably not that interesting. Sorry. Right? Like everybody thinks they're interesting. Like most people don't need a podcast, Just because you and your friend have a good convo. I mean, this includes myself. I mean, I've said I've come close to launching 5,000. I'm probably just not that interesting, right? I think the thing that's gotten a lot of people overextended is the greats make it sound easy, Crissle and Fury make it sound easy.
Sure.
Most people are not Crissle and Fury. Charlemagne and Schultz they don't have any prep. They come in, they turn on the mics, and they go.
Sure.
What you don't see is that Charlemagne's on the radio every day for 6 to 7 hours. Schultz is in comedy clubs.
Sure, these people who turn on the light in a second.
They're working at their craft constantly, so that when it is time to turn on the mics for a podcast, they make the conversation seem easy. That sort of flow and that sort of chemistry seems. Most people, they just don't have it, really.
Sure.
To be honest with you.
Sure. How important is the day of release of a podcast?
I think it's important. We were talking outside about the Idiots doesn't always drop at the same time on Thursday mornings, and it should. And I think it's important to the core audience, because the core audience that really likes a show starts to build their schedule around that a little bit. Mm. And, people start to look forward to, all right, it's Thursday morning. I know I got to go to the gym, but the podcast should drop at 9. I can go at 9:30, and then I'll have something to listen to, right? Mm. So I think it's really about servicing and respecting your core audience. Obviously, if you're not a fan of the show yet, you don't give a shit when it comes out. You're just going to come to it. Sure. When you come to it. But I think in order of keeping your core audience, I think it's a pretty important part of it. Now, having said that, a lot of these basketball podcasts I listen to, they just drop whenever. I listen to a podcast called The Low Post. Zach Lowe, who's like a reporter, I guess, for ESPN. I just kind of check my phone. What I do personally is I have 5 or 6 podcasts that I listen to in pretty heavy rotation. And if I'm about to get on the subway, I open up my app. Who just dropped a new episode? And I think one of the things that Apple has done, which is really helpful, is now it shows you what's just been released that day. Mm. And then I just look and I just say, all right, who's got a new episode? So I think that's kind of pulling a little bit away from you having to kind of keep an internal clock of what's happening and saying, okay, my favorite show drops on.
Are you playing your podcast?
Yeah, I just opened up Lip Service while I was going through my app. Right there.
Okay.
So that's how I do it.
When you think about podcasting and you think about, it's funny because I think like podcasting has almost made people feel like they're celebrities, but they're not. Right?
It's dangerous, right?
It is dangerous. You know why I want to say that for?
It's not dangerous. It's annoying.
But why? Why you say it's annoying?
I don't know. But then again, what's a celebrity in 2018 anyway?
That's true. The reason why I say that for is because, like, look, even myself, I feel thankful. I feel blessed. Almost like I could sit here and say, like, look, what do they say? You made your bones. What do they call that? Right? I put in a lot of work.
Right.
I've had moments that I'm forever blessed and thankful. How about this? Before, I would say, and I think I said this before, I was in Atlanta. I couldn't get a flight home. I couldn't. My ticket. I had to wait to the next flight. I went up to the counter and I was like, "Look, I was like, the guy said, can I help you?" I said, "Look, I'm just trying to get on the flight. I don't have a seat. I don't have anything." He said, "Are you Premium Pete?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I could hear your voice. I just got done listening to an episode. Look, I'm going to sit you actually in business class, so don't worry about it. Keep on doing what you're doing. Say hello to Combat Jack."
I think that's an official.
So that was
that's a moment. That's a level.
That's a very big moment.
I'm waiting for that.
I've been in places. How about this? I do want to say this, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this. I've been in places with my daughter in Jersey.
Right.
In a mall. And somebody, and someone come up to me. I've been in places with my friends I grew up with who don't understand any of this. Who someone came up to me, like, who the fuck wants to fucking take? Somebody asked to take a picture. Take a picture with you? Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is with all that, there's plenty of people who I speak to, who I get introduced to. They say, hey, Premium Pete, that they don't know me. So the point I'm trying to make is, I don't ever take that for granted. But I do believe that podcast has people thinking that everybody knows who the fuck they are.
It's a weird.
They don't.
Yeah, it's a weird energy because I get that sometimes too. Like there are people who know who I am, and it really surprises me, and I can tell they're like really excited to talk to me.
Sure.
But 99.9% of most people have no idea who I am. But now I kind of catch myself like, do people know me in a space? Like it's kind of a weird sort of existence, but I don't think it's specific to podcasting. I mean, I think it's kind of like what social media has done, which is kind of level the playing field in a way or open it up. I mean, I'm sure there are people who get recognized for their tweets or their Instagram posts or their Facebook posts. Like that's the type of, like I've gotten stopped on the street. I've gotten stopped on the street with my kids, which I like because I just kind of was like, isn't that a nice look for my kids? Like, you see that? And if this shit was happening when I was 25, I'd probably be really fucking into it.
Yeah.
But, I think as you get older, you're kind of like, all right, well, what does this really mean for my bottom line, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't really mean that much.
I will say this. You want people to remember you and know your work. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But I will say this. Internets, yourself, don't ever forget that your plan is for you to know your worth. And what I mean by that is in 20 years from now, if you could sit back and live off of what your work created, and nobody's gonna really care about who, knowing you and find out what's more important to you. Some people like to do shit for props and fame.
Right.
And some people like to do shit to provide a life for them,
Well, look, you got to eat. That's the first order of business, right? But then I think when you pull the camera back a little bit, my hope is that, there'll be a book written about podcasting at some point, right? The proverbial book. I'm hoping that this is a chapter, or part of a chapter.
I would love to see it. Listen, was there ever a podcast that you really enjoyed but it didn't work with the fans, so you had to give it the X?
Outside of Sneaker Fiends?
Hey, that's personal right there. That's personal. But you also did admit that you made a mistake.
Sneaker Fiends is one of my regrets. I'll say it on the record again. We should have rocked with Sneaker Fiends longer. The audience doesn't know this, but after a maybe 30-something year hiatus, Pete has brought me back into the sneaker game again. You can't see this. I guess I can see this right now.
Well, I can see, yeah.
What do I got on? I don't even know
Adidas, the Adidas Ultra Boost.
Went with
the Parley collab.
I went with Pete. Took me to Flight Club. He was very kind. He took me to Flight Club last week and personally helped me pick out several pairs.
Well, I wanted you. Let me let the internet know, because some people think like when you go to Flight Club, you're only buying expensive sneakers. We went and bought simple, clean, casual, and comfortable.
Right.
Okay? My man Chris Morrow hit me and was like, yo, Pete, man, the Adidas Ultra Boost, I feel like I'm walking on fucking clouds.
Right.
And it is. To me, it's one of the most comfortable sneakers of the past decade, or more.
Well, it's funny. So can I tell the whole story about why I asked you for help in the first place?
I mean, go ahead.
So I don't know. I was watching Succession. I don't know if anybody out there watched that. But without giving a spoiler, there's a character who's like trying to start a startup company. I mean, he's a rich guy, but he's trying to seem hip to a younger demo, so he has to get the right pair of sneakers. And I forget the pair he ends up buying, but it's like a French brand. It's like Leven or something like that. It's like $700 a sneaker. So I was like looking it up afterwards, and I kind of fell down a rabbit hole and I landed in several articles about CEOs of different companies, what sneakers they wear. And apparently like that's a statement. Like every CEO has to have like their signature shoe and what it says about them and all this shit. And I was like, damn, like, because I told Pete, like, I was heavy into sneakers in the early 80s, and then I totally checked out of the game after when Jordans got released. I thought that was corny because that was the first time I saw people who weren't real sneakerheads kind of rush into the space after they started having like the Mars Black. And I was like, I'm done with this shit. Because I used to go to the stores and like really try to find like all the kicks everywhere. And then once Jordans came into it, I kind of checked out. So I always wore Stan Smiths after that because that was something that I'd worn back in the day, and I still like them.
Clean and comfortable.
You can't go wrong with Stan Smiths, right? So, but then I started reading these articles, and I was like, motherfucker, man, like I gotta take this seriously.
Sure.
So I called up Pete and I said, Pete, like you gotta help me. What do I do here?
We still haven't got you fully there yet, though.
Well, Pete wants to get me in some Yeezuses, and I'm not ready to go there yet.
I think the reason why I say that is because, first of all, whether the Yeezys are comfortable. I will say that they are comfortable. Some of them, like the Wave Runners and all them, are too much of a boat for me.
Right.
I'm not into boat. Sneakers, and to be honest with you, I'm not into sneakers where if they weren't Yeezys, that people would be like, yeah, I wouldn't fuck with that.
Exactly. And that's why I said to you, I was like, look, man, like I can't buy some shit just because it's hype. Like I gotta like the sneaker.
Sure.
I gotta like the look of it.
Sure.
I gotta try it on. Like these feel great.
Sure. And they feel like they're you.
Right. I wouldn't have picked this style. You had to give me the confidence to do that. I would have gotten a different. But they feel tremendous, and it's clean.
Sure, but now you got on. Now you could get a couple different styles in the same pair.
So what's your ultimate vision for me.
And sneakers?
Yeah.
Well, it's gonna take us a while, but
Okay.
I think because it's funny because you sent me over a list and I was like, what the fuck? Like, where did he find? He's find these Alexander Wangs, it's like fucking brown corduroy,
You said the Ronnie
the Ronnie Five
that I picked out were fire.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
approved those.
Yeah, the New Balance ones.
So I have a whole thing now where I find sneakers and then I send Pete a link and I say, Premium Pete approved, yes or no, and then he can tell me.
Yeah, no, listen, he finds them. I'm proud. You came a long way. Hey, listen, rest in peace to our brother Combat Jack. He got his first pair of Jordans at 50 years old,
Right.
and I was the reason why. So it's like
I might be on that same path. I might be on that plan.
and then I don't know if you realize, but then he went ham with it after a while.
Well, that's my problem is now, like even tonight, I'm looking and see what everybody's wearing, right? Like I didn't pay attention to people's sneakers for now. I'm
Sure.
like,
What's he wearing?
what?
You're like, what's he wearing? What's he wearing?
Like so I got to kind of try to curb my enthusiasm a little bit because even like yesterday I sent you, what were those? The Pro.
It's Adidas.
Those are boats though,
yeah,
man.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, they're
those
bulky.
are boats.
They're bulky.
Yeah, I can't pull the trigger on those.
Listen, as long as you can. One thing I liked about it is your purchases were clean, comfortable, and they stay true to who you are.
Okay, that's all.
That's it. Listen, Chris is staying fresh out here, and it was as we wind this episode down. Okay, you think about it. Everybody thinks they could start a business, become an entrepreneur, start a network, start a podcast. Think about it. We start off by saying there's so many networks in this game.
Yes.
What is a day in the life of Chris Morrow? Like meaning, like what time you get up, what time you go into bed, what's
You really want to know?
Yeah, I do.
So one of the problems with Lymes is you can fall. Well, for me, everybody's different. I fall asleep, but I can't. I wake up in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to take all sorts of crazy fucking drugs and supplements to try to make it through the night.
Do you have one of those things that have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
Man, I got that. I got fucking eye masks.
What the
I got fucking earplugs. I'm like a 90-year-old man. Like I got the whole.
You know what's crazy? You
What?
think about when we just meet a girl. As for a guy, and I'm sure for a girl, for a guy. Imagine you just met your wife. Well, she was your girl at the time or a date. And
She always says that to me. She goes, "Were you doing this when we first started dating?"
And you lay in bed,
Yeah.
and she turns around, and you got like these Batman
I got
fucking mask on.
masks on. I got earplugs on. I got head. Because one of the problems with Lymes is I'm really sensitive to sounds.
I don't mean to laugh, but
it's true. We have these conversations. So I'm lying there. I got the fucking head. I have headphones like that, like studio headphones. I put earplugs in first, then I put headphones, then I wear a night mask, and then I take my little pills, and I'm all fucking. She's like, "Who are you?" But no, I definitely was not doing that when I was courting, as they say.
Yeah, no, right. So go ahead. So
So I wake up, I'm groggy, I'm tired, I get my kids to school. And then, every day's different. Like that's one of the nice things about doing it on your own. I don't have a set schedule I got to follow. If a show's recording and I need to be there, I'm going to the recording. If I have a meeting, I need to be there. Loudspeakers does not have offices. We have a studio. So a lot of the meetings I take will be at various studios or hotels are great places to have meetings. So go to a lot of different hotel bars or stuff like that. I spend a lot of time sitting on my bed making phone calls.
why on your bed? Why sitting on your bed?
Because there's construction going on outside of my building, and my bedroom's like the quietest room in the apartment right now. It's like that's probably the real reason. So like I have a lot of flexibility in terms of my day, which is what's nice about it. If there's a downside to it is I'm never not working.
You don't know when to shut it off.
There's no shutting it off. My wife is, it's 12:30 and I'm checking, Andrew Schultz is texting you again. Tell him to fucking leave you alone, and it's like,
come on, Chris.
But you don't understand. We got to record Idiots tomorrow. And it's, the first, and this is a problem. And this, like, literally, this is like an addiction. Whenever I get up, the first thing I do is check my phone. Who texted me over, what happened? What do I got to deal with?
What fires I got to put out?
That's not a good way to start your day. That's not a healthy way to start your day. So
what do you suggest?
Oh, I know exactly what I should do. I just don't do it. I should go fucking meditate for 25 minutes. Then I should do some yoga. Then I should have breakfast. And then I should start my day and check my phone. But I don't do that. I pick up my phone and I check it. So I got to work on that. But the days are long. Wednesdays are my longest days because I also work with the Breakfast Club. So on Wednesdays we tape with them, and then after that we tape Idiots, and then the Read tapes at night. So Wednesdays for me can start at 7 a.m. and end at 11 or 12 at night.
Sure.
And I'm not a young kid anymore, so that's
putting the work in. Putting
the work in. But there's not, and I think it's not just for me. I mean, I think this is going to be true in the future for everybody. There's the whole idea of like a 9-to-5 schedule. I think is kind of out the door.
Sure.
Because I don't think there's a job out there, at least anything remotely creative, where at 5 o'clock you're done and no one's texting you or emailing you or sending you stuff. We're all working all the time. So, I was talking to a friend of mine in Dallas the other day about this, and I was like, you got to try to work for yourself, man, because you're putting in the hours as if you're self-employed, but you're doing it for somebody else.
Sure.
So, you could be working for a company, you can be working for a startup. Somebody's texting you at 10 p.m. Someone's texting you at 11. You're checking your phone at 7 a.m. That's the shit you're supposed to do when you're working for yourself. Because when you're working for yourself, it's easier to justify that because you get the freedom. We were looking, I was talking to my wife last night. We were like, oh shit, October 8th is President's Day. The kids have off from school. Yeah, I'll take off Friday. I can do that. You can't do that. I'm not trying to give like a Dame Dash speech here, but like...
No. You know what? You bring up a good point. And I want to say something because I just had a conversation earlier today with a friend of mine who works for Con Edison for 17 years. And he is young, same age as me, works for Con Ed 17 years, makes probably, a nice 6-figure job, right?
But that's a different type of job, man.
But wait, I want to tell you something. We started talking about what I do versus what he does. Yeah. And he was explaining his the pluses and minuses. He was like, Pete, to be honest with you, I would love to have, where I'm not doing the same thing all the time and where I'm creative. And you know what? Keep in mind, I'm only making what Con Ed is going to pay me.
Right.
I'm not like, and somebody like me could make money from here, and here. But at the same time, I told him, but at the end of the day, sometimes like I'll do a little deal 3 months, 6 months. After that 6 months, I don't know what to do. The point I'm trying to make is
a lot of value in a steady check.
Why I'm scared about, I could say something I'm scared about. At least what he's doing, even though it's not, he can't pick up his kids from school like I can. He can't do a lot of things.
He can plan.
But in 20 years from now,
yeah,
his pension, his whereas the entrepreneur's pension needs to be made themselves.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot to start to do that. You need to close a big deal to be able to start put away for yourself. Like, honestly, you know what? I didn't even know we were going to go here.
Listen, I'll tell you the truth.
But
I'm terrified.
Okay.
I'm fucking terrified. This is a young man's sport. If you're in media, right? There's no pension. There's no union. I hope to be alive for another 30-something years. I hope to be providing for my family, my kids for I can't get caught up in what's just happening right now. Like, I have to try to think about this long term. And I have to be real. I was reading the other day, they call people, I think it's over 40 grays now.
Grays?
That's the term. And like, they'll be like, and again, I'm talking more in like the media space, I'm not talking about Con Ed, but like, sure. They'll be like, well, we already have 2 grays on the team. We don't need another gray. I'm like, fuck, man. I'm a gray.
That's funny. The only time I ever heard gray was when I remember when, it's funny to even think about that, but I remember one day when I went over, I was dating this girl, and she was Jamaican. And I'll never forget her grandfather was there, and he was calling me gray people. He's like, oh, I didn't know you were dating the gray people. And I was like, gray? I was like, and then I remember when we went in the next room, I was like, how am I gray? I was like, I thought I'm white. And then I went back outside and I was like, I remember telling him, I'm Italian, buddy. And he's like, yeah, gray.
That's funny. So when I go to visit my wife's family in Taiwan, in Taiwanese, I think, the term for white people is atoga, I think. And I'm like, so I hear people kind of in this speech peppering like atoga, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, what's that mean, atoga? Big nose ghost.
Really?
And I was like, I guess they got me.
Now they start. I remember you saying that they talk in her language. You don't even know what the hell they're saying.
Nah, and I want to. The craziest thing is there's a very common word in Taiwanese. It could be like the equivalent of the or then or something that sounds almost identical to the N word. And so, like, people will be talking, and I'm constantly like, just like, what? Like, it'll be blah, 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 but like all the time in conversation, I'm just like, because when you're around people who are speaking a language that you don't understand, it kind of just, you tune it out after like 2 seconds until you hear a word that you know.
Sure.
And that's the word that, so I keep kind of like, I'm like spacing out, and then I'm constantly like swinging my head around like, who just said that? And then I'm like, oh, it's, they just said, and then he,
that's classic.
Not a slur.
That's classic. Listen, family moments are always classic. What's next for Loudspeakers Network?
That's a great question. It's a question that I spend a lot of time trying to figure out. I think it's going to be part of the building of that town.
Sure.
I think we're going to be part of that town. I hope we're going to be part of that. And I think for us, the challenge is going to be like to become part of that more corporate system, but maintain a little bit of the soul.
Sure. Is there any breaking news you
There's
could drop?
going to be breaking news. I'm not going to drop it now because I've thought that there's going to be.
What about Mogul? Is Mogul coming back?
Mogul's coming back. We're still trying to figure out the details of that.
Nice.
But Mogul will be coming back.
Any new additions?
There's going to be some people coming.
Okay.
You'll recall this. I always used to fight with Reggie. Don't say shit until it's till it happens. Why? Come on.
Yeah.
And I was like, because sometimes it doesn't happen.
You want to do it for the gram.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna. I got a lot of stuff I could say. It's just again, it's finding that balance. We went down to that podcasting convention
in Philadelphia,
and there was a moment down there where I saw Barry playing they had like some Pac-Man game set up. Barry, who does all our social media.
Podcast in Color?
Yeah, Podcast in Color, which is her handle.
Shouts to Big Barry.
And you guys should follow that if you don't follow that. So anyway, she was standing there with like, it was like 5 other black women. They were all kind of like, and I just kind of like walked up kind of like boldly and like, because I hadn't seen Barry yet. And I said, excuse me, and like went up to Barry. And they all kind of like were like, who's this? Who's this? They said, who's this white guy who just walked up on us like that? I was like, oh, I'm Chris. And they're like, oh, you're Chris Morrow. And I was like, yeah, so I started talking to them. And, they're talking about like they weren't comfortable at the conference and they weren't feeling included. And then, we started talking about loudspeakers and, I forget exactly who said it to me, but she's like, you got to understand, like, you have a real duty. You have a real commitment you have to make because she's like, you have to understand a lot of people in this space who felt shut out from podcasting, who felt like they didn't belong in the space, got into it because of loudspeakers.
Sure.
And got comfortable because of loudspeakers. And
loudspeakers is the Army.
Right.
Better yet the Navy.
And you can't now get a little bit of traction or whatever and forget about like you got it. This is the community that put you on. What are you going to do for that community?
Sure.
And I was like, fair point, man. Like, so I think that's something we got to figure out. I think we do a good job of it. But I think we have to, keep in mind where we came from while growing forward.
Sure. Let me tell you, this is the last one. We kind of touched on it, but I definitely want you to put your ending spin on it. Somebody's listening, multiple people that do a podcast, one person does a podcast, whatever it is, and their hopes and dreams are to maybe get on a network or further it or be a player in the game.
Yeah.
What's your advice to them?
Don't care about a network, man. Like, don't figure out what your story is. What's your best story? What's the story that we all got stories, right? Wherever you come from, you've got something that is singular to you, but is also kind of universal at the same time. And a lot of time those are like stories that we're not comfortable maybe sharing or, are difficult. And it might take a while to figure out what that story even is. But that's what you want to go out there with. What you're passionate about, who you are. There's fake podcasts don't make it, right? Organic podcasts make it. And if you have an organic podcast and you've really poured a lot of your thought into it and time into it, network could be extremely helpful. But at the end of the day, people are going to listen.
Sure.
And it's going to bubble. And what you got to do is you got to come out there with that instead of what it feels easy or quick or, right in front of you. Take your time.
There it is. Listen, internets, the Podfather, the one and only.
CHEA.
Chris Morrow.
All right.
CHEA. Internets, if you enjoyed that episode, I want you to email me at thepremiumpeteshow@gmail.com. Again, that email is thepremiumpeteshow@gmail.com. Let me know what you thought. And listen, all my advertisers out there, all my big businesses, my small businesses, whoever, a friend, a store, you want to advertise on The Premium Pete Show? Email me at thepremiumpeteshow@gmail.com and let's get working. Okay? Make sure you subscribe, rate, leave a comment on all streaming platforms of the podcast. Tell a friend to tell a friend, and we'll see you next episode. CHEA.